If you've ever wondered what the strength and conditioning training looks like for a professional wrestler that is so athletic they regularly deck opponents by flipping out of the ring onto them, then you're in luck, because I've been working with a wrestler just like that for the last 2 years, and today we're going to break down their training together. But rather than looking at the specifics of the finished program that we've done before, I actually wanted to break down the layers of information that we think about before actually creating the final structure that will form our plan. Because for wrestlers, it's pretty interesting. And actually, if you're any athlete, like a rugby player, an MMA fighter, a gymnast, a free runner, whatever, you kind of need to go through these steps. Not even kind of need to go through these steps. You do need to go through these steps before you actually create the plan. So we're going to do that today with this fun and interesting example. So first, we have our top layer of information, and that is top line. I'll write it on the top line.
Nice.
Is that we need to create an additive program. I don't know if I'm spelling additive right here, guys. Also, my handwriting, I actually write joined up. This is a totally separate thing like this, but I feel like that's going to be hard to read on a camera. So I'm going to do it spaced out. So, right, look, the top line is we need to create a program that is additive and simultaneous. And what I mean by that is the fact that if you're a wrestler, you don't have an on-season and an off-season. You could be doing a show every weekend. You might be doing 3 shows in a week. You might have no shows for a month. So this training plan needs to be continuous throughout the wrestling. And by additive, what we mean is that it actually builds the sport. Or should I say, performance in the sport. We want to build sport performance. And that means within skills training and within the actual shows. If we create a training plan where it's entirely focused about like how well can we do on the training plan, then you're going to be going into skills sessions feeling beat up. You're probably going to be fatigued when the shows come around, and you're not going to perform at your best. So this really is functionally the top line that comes before everything we think about in program. Is it additive? And is it simultaneous? Have we created a plan that can be run simultaneously to doing shows regularly and, not having an on-season and off-season? And is this program actually going to improve the athlete's ability to train and perform? Or is it going to take away? Now, when we're thinking about that, there's a couple of things we need to think about. We've already said that this is going to be happening at the same time. There's no on-off season. But the other thing we need to think about here is, okay, if it's going to be additive, well, what are we fighting against, right? Okay, so time constraints. These are the biggest ones. And fatigue. In terms of time constraints, we've got work, because Rayo works another job alongside the professional wrestling, which obviously does take up a lot of time. We have actual time to do the shows. And we have the skills training. And then obviously, actually all of these also contribute to fatigue. So this is the big things we're considering as we move forward. And of course, we've got to have no on-off season. So all of this leads into our next step. And this is why I call this top line, because if we're not thinking about this, then nothing we do afterwards will be an effective training plan, because it's not considered like the top line fundamentals that need to make sense for this plan to work. We're going to move on to the second line now, or the middle line, I would like to call this, because I think there's roughly 3 that you need to think about in general. Obviously, depending on person, you might have more complicated plans, less complicated plans, but let's see. Middle line. And then this is what this moves into. Let me draw this line over here. Never drawn on a piece of paper for you guys before, so if you like it, let me know. Let me know. Put it in the captions. I actually prefer doing it on a big whiteboard, but Airbnb life, when you're a digital nomad, you can't always carry a whiteboard around with you. So let's look at the middle line now. And this is where we're going to start thinking about a bit more details of the sport and specific things the athlete may need. So I'm just going to give you a quick list of all the stuff we need to consider here. First, we've got injury prevention. Oh, I've gone into joined up. Sorry, guys. That's injury prevention. So the reason this is such an important thing when we come to this middle line is if you do professional wrestling, it's a sport where you're going to be taking damage. That is just a reality. It's the same if you do martial arts, same if you do something like BMX, parkour, tricking, even dance to some extent. So actually, if say doing something like breakdancing or ballet, there is going to be damage that is taken. Obviously, ballet seems like an odd example, but if you think about the damage that happens to the feet, training your feet to help prevent injury or manage it is going to be useful. So we want to prevent injury. That could look like a lot of different things. Maybe that's like full range strength work. Maybe it's plyos. Maybe it's, I don't know, specific joint prep. You guys can let your imagination run wild with that, but we're looking to prevent injury because it's a sport of damage. So we need to have that in the plan. The next line, we're going to look at injury recovery. Now, as I say, because this is a sport of damage, you're going to pick up injuries. And actually, when I started working with Rayo, he had a pretty bad shoulder injury, which we've recovered pretty significantly. You know, the dude can do weighted pull-ups very comfortably now, smash out deficit push-ups, ring push-ups. He can do, I think, single leg back lever, maybe even done a full back lever, but I know he's done single leg because I've seen it very recently. He can hold tuck front lever. Essentially, the shoulder is in a lovely, lovely place. And obviously, you can see from all the flips and stuff he'll do, which I will have put up in this video, he is a machine and the shoulder is better. But something that we'll actually note here is injuries are going to happen. And recently he had a knee tear. I think it was MCL or LCL. It was one of the lateral ligaments. And when that happens, you just got to work around it. So that meant we were adapting the plan to train a bit of the upper body, but we were also looking to recover the injury. So worked alongside a physio, built in what we needed to, but injuries are going to happen. So you need to have injury recovery and you're going to have space in your plan. So this is the thing. It's just thinking about space in the plan to deal with it. And I mean, really, it's kind of like if you don't have an injury, great. If you don't have an injury, great. Like, don't worry about really having injuries that don't exist, obviously. But this is something really important. If you're just doing any sport where damage happens, injury prevention, injury recovery are massive. And honestly, they're kind of one of the primary things you're thinking about for this type of sport because, again, we're talking about it being additive. So a lot of this is like how great a condition can we keep the body in? And well, when you're doing a sport such as rugby, such as wrestling, such as martial arts, you're going to get damaged, you're going to have injuries, and actually stopping being damaged and recovering injuries is going to be one of the best ways you can perform at your best. Now, as we move on from the injury and we actually look to more like just athletic qualities, a big pair is power plus strength. And I'm just going to put in brackets maximal because we will talk about conditioning later. But we want max power and strength. Why? Because, well, firstly, he does incredible movements like flipping out of the ring to land on people, flipping, belly flopping people, like all of this stuff requires crazy amounts of power. And you need to be able to do these flips really without a second thought when you're putting it into such a chaotic environment and such a coordinationally demanding environment. Like, we don't want any of these moves that Rayo is doing to be his true maximal output. We want these to be within his wheelhouse. We want it to maybe be like 80%. So we want to work power to drive that as high as we can. And similarly with strength. Obviously, the stronger you are, the more robust your tissues are. So it helps for injury prevention, but it also allows you to access more movements, more different ranges, and it allows you to work with bigger opponents. Actually, one of the funniest things he's ever told me was that when you've got a really big guy doing a show with a smaller guy, they call it a meaty man hitting meat or something like that.
Big meaty man slapping meat. That's what I want.
So it's, you know, you need to be strong enough to be able to actually go with these big guys and do these really incredible shows and take these big hits. So building overall strength is essential. Building overall power is essential because it makes not only moves easier to perform, less of like a max effort, and you can focus on the skill and the coordination of the movement, but also it allows you to be safer and it allows you to take part in these more expansive shows with bigger guys, stronger guys. And really, that's what you're looking for as a wrestler, right? The biggest shows, the most exciting shows. And that is really, really helpful. Then the next thing we're going to think about is hypertrophy. Why? Well, one, obviously muscle is useful. It's just a useful thing. Again, it's about robust tissues, building size. It's always going to be good for you. But when it comes to wrestling, it's about the show. It's about the look. You want to look big, intimidating, ripped muscles. Like, that's part of the thing of it. It's the show of it. So this is actually like a really essential thing for the show. And you want to be focusing on that. You want to get bigger, stronger. And again, it's also this idea of being able to train with the bigger guys, go with the bigger guys, because wrestling in this sense is not a weight class sport. It's a show sport, right? And you need to be capable of doing it with as many people as you can to get those opportunities and to feel confident in what you're doing. So we've been trying to get jacked up. And actually, when we had the knee injury that I mentioned earlier, we just went full on upper body mode and Rayo put on a chonky bit of size. So it does really work there. And it just looks cool. So yeah, show, fun, makes it look cool. You can do it with bigger guys. Coming on from hypertrophy, then we're going to look at this final thing, because obviously we mentioned injury prevention, which might be full range, joint prep, blah, blah, blah. So we're not going to include all of that sort of stuff. I'm going to call this the final thing, which is wide range conditioning. And by this, I mean everything from power endurance to strength endurance to actual aerobic cardio. And the reason being is you're going to need basically good conditioning in every element as a wrestler. You need your aerobic for your skills training. Because when you're planning a show, when you're learning new moves, you might be in the gym for like 2-3 hours at a time, going over and over and over again. So you need aerobic cardio. When you're in a match, maybe the match you're doing is 2 minutes, 5 minutes. You need anaerobic conditioning because you need to be able to go at a fast pace and a hard pace the whole time. I don't know how to spell anaerobic off the top of my head. Just going to say not aerobic. Imagine that's anaerobic. You need to go hard. You know, the shows are exciting because they can keep such a pace, and that requires incredible anaerobic conditioning, like it just does. And you need strength endurance. If you're going to lift people up over and over again, whilst the maximal strength matters because it's how much you can lift, you know, how big is that person, your strength endurance matters of how many times you can do it. If you can only lift your opponent once in a show, it's not going to be a great show. Same with the power endurance. If you can only do one flip, well, it's not going to be the best show ever, right? You want to do a few, or you at least want to be jumping around, doing different things. So we need this wide range conditioning covering everything. It's super important. That really is our middle line. I don't think I've got any more notes on that. Let me just check. I don't. So now we come to the bottom line of the program here. And then this is really what generates our structure. So we need to consider what we've got of our top line here. We need to consider what we've got in our middle line. What does this give us for our bottom line? We've worked on being additive. So we've done things like injury prevention, power, hypertrophy, conditioning, all the things that will make us better at the sport and better at training the sport. We know it's got to be simultaneous. So we know we're going to have to adapt this plan potentially based on what's going on. So the way we're going to create this is firstly, all right, we need to be realistic about the time constraints and make sure it's additive. We're going to go through a 3-day-a-week plan. Trying to keep things to about an hour if we can. And that's totally doable for a program like this, especially if you go in, go hard and keep it pretty specific. Now, because we know Rayo's got work, we know he's got shows which might build up a lot of fatigue, and you never know what's going to go on, we're going to also have 3 short days. And this is something I've done with Rayo since I've worked with him. We always have the main plan at 3 days a week. And we have a mirrored plan here of 3 short days. So we have day 1 long, day 2 short, day 2 long, day 2 short, day 3 long, day 3 short. And if he say can do day 1 long, great. But maybe he's really busy. So instead of skipping it, he can jump into day 2 short. That then allows him, say he gets a bit more free time, he can then jump into day 3 long, or maybe does short, short, long. Doesn't really matter. What this just means is we're able to keep consistency of training, and consistency of training stimulus is far more important than doing like the perfect plan every single week if that means it's not going to happen. So we have 3 days a week, which takes account for the time constraints, and then we're also adding in these short days just in case. So we're really taking care of these time constraints. We're taking care of the fatigue. If we need to cut down to a short day because of fatigue, not even time, great, we can do that. And it also allows us to account for the fact that there's no on-off season. So we've got 3 days a week, so it's not that demanding on the body. We're sticking it down to an hour, so it's not that much volume. And if we really need to, we can swap onto short days. So even when he's super busy, there is an option of getting things in. And you could think about keeping these short days as quite simple if you wanted to. Say you're on the road as a wrestler, then a simple plan that you could maybe do in a hotel gym or just a 24-hour fitness. Perfect. And obviously you can take this exact same approach if you're an MMA fighter, if you're a martial artist, because you don't have those off seasons. If you're a jiu-jitsu fighter, it might even be a better one because some jiu-jitsu athletes will compete every weekend, every other weekend. So this can be a really, really great way to go about structuring your plan. Next, we've got to think, okay, what comes after that? Okay, not a lot, because to be honest, that really considers most of the things we're going to do. We just need to fit all of this into these, right? But there is one addition I like to make, which is optional cardio. And specifically off-feet cardio. Specifically off-feet cardio. Now, the reason I want to do that is because off-feet cardio compared to running is just going to give less impact, which means less fatigue. So on days where Rayo has more time, we like to get him just on a bike, he sticks it in front of the TV, he's got an exercise bike at home, and then he does, you know, either some steady state, maybe it's some threshold intervals, maybe it's something a little bit higher intensity, but we have this in here for when there is time, because conditioning is never going to be a negative in a sport like this. I mean, just as a rule of thumb, you can basically never have enough conditioning. One of the best things someone ever said to me is there was this woman in a gym I used to work at, and funny enough, called Emily, not my Emily, but a lady called Emily. And I went to her, I was like, every time I see you, you're doing cardio. And she goes, yeah, of course I am. Because I do it at the end of every session. Even if it's a 5-minute HIIT workout, I'm going to do something for cardio, because you can never have enough cardio. And this is so real. So you can just add these optional ones in, and when you can fit them in, because you can't have enough cardio. And honestly, in a sport like this, in a sport like jiu-jitsu, wrestling, dance, parkour, a bit of cardio every training session is going to do wonders for you. Okay, so that really is the plan. Let me rip this out quick. So let you guys see that. That is the top line, bottom line, middle line that we need to think about. Now, like I say, I'm not going to go into the details of the plan, but I just want to show you how we can then break this out. So we know we've got 1, 2, 3. Let's not go into specifics, but we know we need to fit injury prevention, injury recovery, power, strength, hypertrophy, wide range conditioning. And let's just see how we can fit this in here. We know it needs to be an hour. So what I could think about doing is maybe let's go injury prevention / recovery at the start. If there's any like little movements, maybe it's some ankle work, maybe it's some dead hangs, things like that. Oftentimes injury prevention and injury recovery can act as quite a good warm up. Of course, the actual strength training you do will also act as that. So that's going to be somewhat integrated. But if there's any specifics, then we can do that. For me at the moment, specifically, I've got a bit of elbow tendonitis. So before every session I do some isometrics, I do some mobility in my wrists because they're a bit wacky. And I had a pretty bad ankle injury last year. So also a lot of my workouts start with a bit of ankle work, bit of calf raises, things like that. And it's a great way to just start getting moving. And of course, you can stretch in between those times. Off the back of each of these, maybe we look at power max. And maybe that's like a power clean plus power jerk. And then over here, maybe we look at some power max, but it's jumps, something like that. Or maybe we just got some light plyos to warm it up and then we do a few jumps as well. And that could be injury recovery, injury prevention. You can think about that. However, then off the back of this, okay, we've done quite a lot. Let's maybe say 2 accessories. Maybe their upper body, maybe their lower body, maybe their core, who knows. For the sake of it, let's say these are upper. Let's say this is lower here. And if we're doing lower accessories here, maybe we could say, let's do an upper strength movement here, primed quite well from the power jerk. And that could be maybe a weighted pull-up, weighted dip. Maybe we do 2 of those, who knows? And then we can do some lower strength here. Again, this is just a quick write out. You may fit more in here. You'd have to think about the individual athlete or yourself if you're writing for yourself. So there was a very loud car beep. The Portuguese love to fucking beep. And then on day 2, okay, let's chuck in an actual programmed conditioning session here. Because obviously we said we may have some extras outside that. So let's chuck in a conditioning session here. That might include some power endurance, some strength endurance. It's worth noting that. So let's say PE for power endurance, SE for strength endurance, which you would do in that because that is a type of conditioning. And we could also think about here maybe doing I don't know, we could do a lower strength and an upper strength in here as well. Because here maybe we did a upper push, here maybe we did a lower pull, and we could swap it over there. And because you've got space in this program, because you're only doing 3 days, you're gonna get a decent amount of rest. You can do that. And then, of course, put in here, maybe we do accessories again. Maybe it's 3x accessories. And these might be core. Just gonna draw an arrow out. Range. Hypertrophy. You know, you can really just create this plan. And if you look at this, we haven't even done that much here. It's just, you know, I've just written it out like this. Of course, it's going to take more time once you start filling in exercises. You might have to move stuff around. You need to think about the specific athlete. But this is functionally how we create program structures. We do this. Top line. Okay, what are the things we need to be considering? What does that look like in the middle line? And then how does that create this bottom line of what the program needs to look like? Then we can simply draw out the days, draw out the things that we need to do in each of those days, and then start filling in exercises. And of course, you know, you could do one short underneath. And here I'd go, okay, I'd just say 1 accessory, fuck off the upper strength because we do that on day 2. We'll just do an upper strength and a lower strength once in the week and chuck in, I don't know, less power movements. Get it down to 3 exercises and a lot less sets. Super easy. You'd literally just look above, cut it down as you go below. And then the optional cardio on the side. We said this is going to be with a bit of power endurance, strength endurance, so we can assume this is going to be a Metcon. So that's where we go off-feet cardio. I've just done off-feet cardio. And then maybe this is LISS, low intensity steady state, and threshold. And obviously we would program that in, so it's in the program, but that's how you create plans, and that is what a training plan for a very, very athletic wrestler looks like. And this is something that I would take away if you do any sort of combat sport, any sport where damage builds up, like BMXing, like free running. Like I say, even dance in some cases. I mean, pole dancing is pretty savage on the body. It's this type of approach you need to take, and especially for sports where there's no on-off season. So you want to think additive, simultaneous. Look at this middle line, and obviously this will vary a little bit based on sport, but as a big rule of thumb, maximal power, maximal strength, wide range conditioning, some hypertrophy, injury recovery, injury prevention, and then what does that look like on your bottom line with an athlete like this who is very athletic, high sport demand, and has a job probably 3 days a week with some short options and some off-peak cardio. And that is how you come to these conclusions to create plans. So I hope that was interesting for you guys. It was a bit of a different way to look at programming that we haven't necessarily done before, actually looking at the thought processes that come before the program. And I think it's really important to understand that actually quite a lot of thought process needs to happen. Did I say thought process needs to happen before you create the plan. And that is how it is. So thank you for having a listen to me yap away today, guys. I appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will catch you in the next one.